You're listening to Leaders of AI, the podcast that cuts through the noise to bring you real-world insights, right-now applications, and future-shaping breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. Here are your hosts, Julia McCoy and Dave Shapiro. We now have Google Alpha Chip inventing computer chips. We've never had that in the history.
One of the big unsolved mysteries is always, why is it that when companies grow in size, they become less innovative, less efficient?
I would not have gotten as quality healthcare as I did without the help of Claude and ChatGPT.
Solving for living hundreds of years, but we're not waking up for a paycheck. I think life gets really interesting, if not beautiful.
We're just at the beginning. This is year zero of the AI revolution. We're ground floor. It's happening 2024. History will mark.
Hey, welcome back to Leaders of AI, the podcast that cuts through the clutter and gives you what you need to know about what's coming to industries from AI here and in the future. So we cover the here and now and the future of what post-labor society looks like, the meaning economy, all of that. I'm your host, Julia McCoy, joined by Dave Shapiro, my co-host. And today we have a special guest, Dylan Curious, the one and only YouTuber. What's funny is I think it was through Dylan I actually got to meet Dave. Well, no, I left a creepy comment on Dave's YouTube channel. Anyway, that's an entirely another story. But Dylan, it's so great to have you here.
Yeah, I love it. It's the dream team. I'm so excited. You're two of my two favorite AI YouTubers or former AI YouTubers, and I am so excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Yep. No, thanks for pulling all this together, Julia. So just I guess a quick note behind the scenes for the audience is Julia and I have been talking every day for a couple weeks now. Dylan and I are always exchanging text messages and emails, pointers and news and everything. Yeah. So it just made sense to get everyone on the same page. And I know a lot of people are like, Dave, didn't you quit AI? And it's sort of, but Julie is kind of taking over. So
did you see the whole X thread? I don't know if you're on X as much as we are, Dylan, but somebody actually replied to Dave and they were like, what kind of offer did Julia make you to pull you out of AI retirement?
Yep. Yeah, but so there's still lots of work to do, and that's exactly why we're here. So, Julia, you pulled together quite a few topics today. Did you want to give a quick highlight of kind of the topics you want to cover, and then we'll dive into them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to talk about several things. First of all, AI and call centers. This was on one of Dylan's recent YouTube videos, which if you haven't checked his YouTube channel out, you probably have if you're listening to this and you know about us. But if you haven't, definitely go to Dylan Curious on YouTube and subscribe. Great content. Some of the best breakdowns on what's coming and what's happening right now are on his channel. But today we want to cover how Verizon is actually deploying AI in call centers. It's not what I expected. I actually dug into this story after coming across it in your video, Dylan. And then scientific discoveries with AI, where AI models are actually helping virologists identify over 160,000 new viruses, including new species of RNA virus. Pretty crazy, just the capabilities in science that are happening through AI. And then some societal and ethical concerns like AI's role in online dating. We should talk about that. Let's start with the first one, which is Verizon deploying AI in call centers. So here's the story, and this just occurred. I'm actually pulling up the article right now. It's October 11th. This story came out, and it's not what you think. I think there's a lot of AI apps that are being developed for cold calling, things like that. But what I see is an inaccurate deployment of the technology where it's actually trying to take over the call itself, which is such a human trust factor endeavor still, that I think automating that is not the best idea. But what Verizon did was actually bring AI systems inside its call centers that are helping them manage and retain best practices around how the operators, the human operators in the call, are transcribing, routing, and handling the calls. So the workflow automation of the call center is what Verizon is doing at a pretty high level, deploying AI. And a term that they came up with is ROAI instead of ROI, using AI to deploy return on investment. What are your thoughts? Dylan, I'll start with you since you actually shared this story in your YouTube video.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always sort of been fascinated in the way AI can be deployed that's not just straightforward talking to the customers. And Verizon's actually been pretty on top of it. They had a whole system for how to figure out where to dig. Like a lot of people, they dig just for housing or construction and then they cut cable lines and it causes a lot of issues. So they were able to like sort of look through these thousands and thousands of requests that come in and try to figure out which ones actually cause the most damage, like how to automatically send those to the right people and how to prioritize them, but not how to automate the whole thing. And then now they come across this article and they're kind of doing the same thing where they're not, putting the frontline people into chatbots, but they're giving them tools to be better humans. And I mean, it seems to me like a decent way to start deploying this technology.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who I started my career many, many, many years ago, back in the 2000s in information technology. And, I can't tell you the number of businesses that are just from a technology perspective completely dysfunctional because, left hand doesn't talk to the right hand, where you have, someone leaves and they take all their knowledge with them. They call it tribal knowledge is kind of what we call it in the industry. But you can look through people's old tickets, their old notes. But with AI now, you can just transcribe everything, and you can actually look at who are your top techs, who are your top whether they're tier one, triage, or tier two, tier three, whatever. Now we have a tool that can actually read all of this and make sense of it, not just the old school NLP, which is like bag of words, and you kind of, you can do sentiment analysis, like is the customer angry, yes or no? Because that's pretty much all you could really reliably answer until generative AI. So this use case is actually kind of surprising to me because I have worked with clients and in my capacity as a consultant where they were just reducing call volume just completely, just say talk to the chatbot instead because it has the endpoints. But it sounds like you can't 100% get rid of the human element. But in this case, you're really empowering, people to say, okay, based on this customer, here's probably what they're calling. I'm guessing that it's going to bring up tribal knowledge, whether it's technical or customer specific knowledge, and it's not a pipe dream because I can't tell you the number of companies who's had this as a pipe dream for many, many years, which is like kind of the mantra from a company that I worked at almost a decade ago, getting old. I don't recommend that. And we'll actually talk about aging later this episode. But yeah, so it's been a pipe dream, and one of the things that a product manager on my team said is nobody consumes their own data, and it's because we didn't really have a way of consuming our own data. So all the data is there, you got all the message transcripts, you got all the emails, you got everything, but we didn't really have a way of making sense of it. So it's really totally not surprising that a company like Verizon, a telephone company, basically, communications company, it doesn't surprise me that they're kind of at the cutting edge of making use of this technology. And I think that this is a good sign because, whenever I'm talking about the meaning economy, it's, that human to human connection. And some people would actually prefer to probably talk to an automated robot. But if you do have that personality and you're empowering humans, like that's probably a good direction to go. So yeah, great find, Dylan.
Maybe I'll throw one more thing in there too. Is like in the world of complexity sciences, one of the big unsolved mysteries is always why is it that when companies grow in size, they become less innovative, less efficient, based on a bunch of different ROI measurements, like the amount of patents they file and just their customer happiness and the kind of money they make. And cities, when they double in size, they tend to do the exact opposite. The more people that pack into a city, the more innovation comes from it, the more new restaurants open up, the more new businesses. And there's a scale economy too, where if you double the size of a city, you don't necessarily need twice as many more gas stations. They become more efficient with resources. So why companies are so different from cities has always fascinated me. And it seems like artificial intelligence in between those crevices might be kind of the solution to some of that communication and that natural kind of way to grow in a more efficient way.
Yeah. The way that I think of it is that the combination of artificial intelligence plus all the other tools, like RAG, retrieval augmented generation agents, that's like growing a thicker layer of white matter. So gray matter is what is the thinking part of your brain, and the white matter is the wiring of your brain. And so Dylan, to your point, I would suspect this is completely just based on intuition, but that cities become more efficient over time because that allows for more happenstance interactions. There's probably a more mathematical way of putting that, but it's like you're more likely to find your tribe in a bigger city, and it's a self-organizing, complex adaptive system. Whereas a company is not allowed to be that self-organizing. But if you have these agents, whether it's AI that can connect all the data lakes together and all the people to the right people, then that's where you solve that phenomenon of the left hand not talking to the right hand. And by the way, every institution, whether it's a company, a university, a government, every institution above a certain size has that problem, and to date has not really been a solved problem. So we need that fundamental step change that artificial intelligence will really add to give companies a new ability to self-organize in a way that they just couldn't before.
Yeah, I think that use case of what Verizon is doing is so interesting because it really fills those gaps. If you look at like how they're structuring it, they're calling these things Gen AI chatbots. And one of the cases, like very specifically, the way they're using it is they're matching it up to live agents on a live call. And it's doing this live transcription of that call, turning into this personal research assistant that then feeds whatever answer that agent needs to give the customer. It feeds them that answer live on the call. So they like don't even have to like pick up their hands and go type in a knowledge base. Like that to me is like such a beautiful use case of AI where you're actually getting real-time answers and you don't even have to research it.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a little angel on your shoulder just saying like, "Oh, this is what you need next." It's like in video games, you ever play like, you have Cortana just says like, "This is where you need to go next, Master Chief." It's like we're actually building those tools now. And I can't wait till you have like on your phone where it's just listening. It's like, "Oh, hey, Dave, you said that you were supposed to go to groceries. Oh, crap, I got to go get groceries." Something like that.
Or the groceries are at your door. You open your
There you
door
go.
and it's like delivered by, the humanoid that connected to your agent inside your phone.
Yeah, there you go. That's the next
day.
step. That's the next step.
What's funny is like it brings back this memory, and you kind of like triggered a core memory saying that. But for a long time I worked at the company called Zappos. It's a shoe company that was under the Amazon umbrella, and they were really famous for their customer service. They gave their employees like a good amount of money and treated them really well, and they just did better customer service. There was no reward for getting off the phone quickly, and it was kind of a people culture centered company. And way back in the day, if you guys remember Watson, it was an IBM project that was one of the first times machine intelligence kind of hit the mainstream. It was playing Jeopardy. And it was just answering these really fascinating questions with superhuman ability. And I remember thinking, man, if our call center here, I even told the CEO this, I was like, if our call center could tap into a tool like this, people would call us just to answer fun questions. And then that would be our marketing. That would be like, because people like, oh, I call Zappos to like figure out, a restaurant or just any kind of weird question. And if we did that, they would love us. And then they would be learning about the website and they'd be comfortable calling us, buying things, returning things. And it might be worth, having no marketing budget and putting it into a tool like that. So obviously it didn't work. Like nothing happened from that, but it just, it goes to show they're kind of thinking about things in a different way.
Yep. Yeah. No, I sold shoes briefly before my technology career. And, we had the Keen, the Keen brand, like the rep would come and just tell us like, here's how the shoes are made. And, here's our ethos. And like, it actually helped a lot to sell shoes. I remember one guy came in and he was a, older gentleman, very nice guy. And he was, he had to go all over the place selling used cars. And so he was hiking up and down old gravel lots. And I'm like, well, it really sounds like what you need is like a hiking boot. I know it's not what you're thinking. But I just imagine if you had that conversation, like, man, if I knew that I could call up because I'm a big fan of zero shoes or like minimalist shoes, and I'm like, I haven't gone because every time I go to a store, like I talk to a human who's not necessarily that informed. But if I could call Zappos and be like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I like, I would totally I would buy a new pair of shoes like tomorrow.
Yeah, just make it fun.
Yep.
That's so funny. I would have never thought you worked at a shoe. Julie, do you have a weird first job? What was your first job? Did you do anything like outside of tech?
I
worked at a pizza place. So I was like,
I worked in the grill at McDonald's. So I'm not very good.
Okay.
The classic.
I did learn a lot though.
Yeah. No, I delivered pizza for Domino's. I did carpet cleaning. That was the hardest I've ever worked. 16-hour days. Yeah. Yeah. So
And probably the least money you ever made.
it was okay, but it was not glamorous for sure. We got tips sometimes, but yeah.
My
Getting
dream
off
job was to
topic
be
here.
that. Oh
Just
yeah, okay.
kidding.
Go for it.
It's okay. Go ahead, Dylan.
All right, fine. Last one. But like my dream job was actually to like in college, I wanted to be the mascot for my school. Like I would like they paid you a small salary and got your tuition paid for if you were the mascot. And I tried and tried and tried, and I got like there was 3 of us left in the running, and I lost it. But I almost was Swoop, which was like a big bird, and I was gonna like run around all the football games. Lost dreams.
Oh, there you go.
Then I ended up at a pizza
there's
place.
a YouTuber making 18 million a year, kind of doing Blippi. It's an
There you go.
adult dressed up in orange, running around.
Future.
So I'm just saying, you still might have that dream that might be monetizable.
There you go.
All right, back on topic, Dylan. It's a problem I have. What do we got next?
I mean, your channel's called Dylan Curious. When you're curious, you go down rabbit holes.
It takes you in all the
Yeah.
wrong places. Yeah.
But the other story I wanted to bring up is what's happening in scientific discoveries with AI. So this comes from Science Daily. Also got this from your awesome YouTube channel, Dylan. So this released October 9th from the University of Sydney. And it's talking about how there was the largest discovery of new viruses basically that occurred in history, which is insane, first of all. Like, what? The scale of these transformations that we see in the news every week, I think like it's so easy to completely gloss over or just not observe the fact that, hold on, like each of these occurrences of something massive new happening, like, you know, we now have Google Alpha Chip inventing computer chips. We've never had that in the history of anything humanity's ever built. So it's insane to see these things happening like on a regular basis. So over 160,000 new viruses were basically discovered using a machine learning tool. And the researchers that did this with machine learning believe that this will vastly improve how we actually map out life on Earth. And it will help us identify millions more viruses that we have yet to even characterize. So that's insane. First of all, like, can we just take a moment to the largest study that's ever happened on viruses was done by AI, and it just happened this October. And like, where is that going to lead us into with the idea of longevity, which is something pretty amazing, you know, where we can have health spans that extend past hundreds of years. And that's a whole direction that AI could be bringing us. But thoughts on that? Start with you, Dylan.
No, I have no idea how to comprehend it. It's like I'm constantly in awe because this will be the first, like this is just the first time in the billion-year history, or the 4.2 billion year history of Earth, that we've ever been able to map anything of this kind of scale. And soon enough, the kind of tools will exist in the world to actually map their interactions, to think about the complexity between the virome, like all the viruses that kind of live inside of us and actually in some ways help the microbiome, like all the bacteria that live inside of us, like, and then the human cells on top of it, and how the DNA interacts and how the protein interacts, and the whole thing. And then in the environment, like there's just a certain kind of prediction that won't be at the scale of anything that like the world has ever seen before. And it will be fascinating, and it could lead to incredibly great miracles in terms of science, I think.
Yeah. Totally agree. Dave, where are you going with this?
I mean, it's simple. It's tricorders. We're gonna have medical tricorders soon. So for anyone not familiar, it's Dr. Crusher or Bones, opens up a little device, and you wave a little wand over someone, and it's like, oh, you have X, Y, and Z. There are things that we can detect with, like you can listen to someone's breathing patterns and diagnose all kinds of diseases, whether heart disease or pulmonary disease. You can look at the color of someone's blood. There's all kinds of stuff that AI is able to do. And so you combine this. And by the way, I just saw that there are literally USB genome sequencers that you can buy now. I don't know if they're probably not the most user friendly. They're probably not like, take it out into the woods, but we're getting close to the medical tricorder kind of level technology. And so there's a few kind of implications that I would anticipate from these kinds of technologies. Number one, just having that library. So you look at AlphaFold, which allowed us to create hundreds of thousands, a database of hundreds of thousands of proteins. AlphaProteo, which is the kind of the successor to that, all by Google DeepMind, which allows you to design specific proteins for very specific purposes. You combine that with these other kinds of technologies that allow you to just map out the entire human genome, the entire human metabolome. Like, I've been saying that these things are coming, and this is just another sign of what is coming, because having that library, having that catalog, and then being able to understand it and do work on it. So that's on the research side. But then also, I do think that that there will be downstream impacts on the clinical side, although just as in the AI space, the distance between the lab and commercial deployment is often pretty big, because there's like, scientists have found this discovery that could help mice live twice as long, and but then nothing ever comes of it. So there is a little bit of caution to not over index on whenever something is done in the lab, it doesn't necessarily directly translate. However, this story in particular reminds me of when I was actually at Duke University. While I was there, one of the professors actually won the Nobel Prize, and I don't remember the exact details of what he won or what his work had done, but it was basically one discovery led to an entire new class of medicines, like decades later. And so you can have these kind of butterfly effects, and this happens all the time in science, where you unlock something, and it, whether it gives you a new method or a new approach or a new category of research or just a whole new avenue. And so when I see these kinds of step changes, we're not going to know the full implications in a year or two. This is where we're going to look back in 10, 20 years and say that was the moment that changed everything. But the thing is, particularly with AI, we're getting multiple moments like that every year where I'm like, the long-term implications of this are impossible to predict. So again, for me, I don't get as excited about this news just because it's become so normalized, but it's good to see, like, on a regular basis, like, oh, cool, there's another thing. Who knows where that'll turn out?
Yeah.
But go.
It's like a whole new branch of science, and we're like, oh, that's no big deal. Like, it's gonna happen every week.
That's what I can't get over. I'm like, guys, can we take a minute and just like appreciate this advancement?
Yeah. Hey, Julia, when you were at the AI4 conference, did you walk the exhibit hall and see the ultrasound AI booth? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I went
to
all the booths, but it was like a break hour. It was a weird time. Like, no one was at their booths, and I waited for an hour.
Well, I found this project. This was an AI project that was like really fascinating. But ultrasounds, which seem so like you go to the doctor and it's like you check for babies or whatever, and it's this big device. But realistically, that the ultrasound tool isn't super expensive. It's like $100 device if you want to build a commercial company around it. But the technology behind it is sort of what the medicine is. And now that we have AI, this company was like, what else could somebody at home discover about their body? Like, it's an ultrasound. If you put it over your lungs, if you put it over your neck, if you put it over your brain, your stomach, can it tell you like what food's in your stomach? Could it interact with your body in other ways? And they were just discovering all these fascinating ways that you could apply a machine learning model to a home ultrasound. And it got me thinking, like, man, if somebody really funded this and got all the right data and figured out what upset stomachs look like, we could maybe start mapping, like, oh, this is the kind of upset stomach you have. This is the kind of like breathing issue you have. Or maybe it could give us, devices that could give us all sorts of information about how healthy we are or how our workout was or stuff. And because it just wasn't ever accurate enough, it's not like x-rays. Like, ultrasounds are very mushy. They don't give you super detailed information. But AI, can find incredible images in pixelated images. They can like upscale them. Like, the same thing can happen. It can upscale kind of fuzzy versions of ultrasounds and tell you all sorts of interesting things. And like, just blows my mind. It's like the same device we've had for 30 years, but now completely reinvented with technology on the back end.
That is just an absolute nightmare for a hypochondriac, speaking as a hypochondriac. What's wrong over here? What does that mean? Yeah, they'd have to come with a really big disclaimer, like, do not diagnose yourself. Go into a doctor like, I took this home ultrasound, and the doctor's like, "Oh no!" Like,
You stay
David's
on
like
it.
David.
Find out.
David is literally the one. David's literally the one guy who can invent a tricorder and then not be able to use it on himself for anxiety reasons.
I actually had to take off my Fitbit for a few months because it was too stressful to just like be constantly reminded that you're stressed out. so,
Too
so yeah,
stressful. I'm
if I
stressed
can't
out.
handle a Fitbit, I couldn't handle a tricorder.
I'm sure it's relatable for a lot of people
Yep.
listening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the
Oh
whole
yeah.
WebMD thing, like, oh, I
I did
sneezed. I might have cancer.
I did get over that, but and
That's
to be
funny.
fair, like, so I've mentioned quite a few times, as I'm like recovering from burnout and taking a break from YouTube and just spending time in the woods, like, it was actually, I would not have gotten as quality healthcare as I did without the help of Claude and Chat GPT, because it's just like, I told it my whole story because it's like I was tired of like going from one doctor to another, and they're like, I don't know, and I'm like, okay, let me just tell you, AI chatbot, the whole story, and help me write a document so I can just literally hand it to the doctor. Here's the symptoms, here's the evidence, here's what's going on, and then finally I got a diagnosis, and then I just sent. Once you have lab work, it's like my wife and I were joking because doctors, they kind of only respond to red numbers. So like if the number on your lab report is red, it's like that's bad. So once you get that, but yeah, no, it's just like the ability to have that dialogue. And obviously, this is not saying use a chatbot to diagnose yourself, but it certainly helped. Get higher quality medical care, and I just can't wait until those systems are embedded in literally every doctor's office. And some of the leaks, Sam Altman is saying that doctors are secretly using Chat GPT to help them. So I'm glad that these tools are already good enough to be used. And again, like you said, Julia, we're just at the beginning. This is year zero of the AI revolution. We're ground floor. It's happening 2024. I'm convinced history will mark this as the beginning of it all. So that's my soapbox spiel about it all.
Yeah. If we throw a little AGI into this, which we got to go there. I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
got to go
Oh
there. If
yeah.
you're talking about us,
Oh yeah.
especially us three. So this idea that whenever longevity hits and we can combat all these age-related diseases, if not completely eradicate them, like heart disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, we can achieve this ability to live a super long, healthy life, which usually translates to economic benefits like productivity. But if we think of this idea of what's coming, which is Dave and I have this phrase in the book we're writing, the decoupling of labor from capital. If we look at that pattern coming to the society that we're going to live in when AGI is here, then what does higher productivity from longevity mean? And I think that gets really interesting, because if we don't have to wake up and attach what we do to the need to pay bills, I think life gets really interesting. I think that whole paradigm is like, there's so much brokenness there, because when a human being, which is like organic matter, soul, heart, that gets very philosophical anyways, when you attach that human being to this inorganic pattern of having to work to produce a paycheck, to produce economic gain, I think that human kind of loses their being. And we are human beings after all. So I think what's coming with where longevity can take us into this realm of eradicating diseases and like solving for living hundreds of years, but we're not waking up for a paycheck. I think life gets like really interesting, if not beautiful. And that's that idea of like this era of abundance that isn't even mainstream, because it's more, it gets more clicks to talk about a dystopia. So that's something I'm really interested in, is like, okay, when longevity, when compute power, when we have all these things and they're at this height and we've solved problems in history that we've never solved before or in humanity, then what does that look like when we don't actually have to wake up and work for capital? Oh my gosh, like that's a potential beautiful life. And I think like one of the best ways to get ready is to find your meaning now. Like, what brings you meaning? What do you want to get up and do? Like, if I wasn't making money, and it's funny because I just left my full-time job in AI, so technically I'm not making any money and I'm starting up all over again. But I know I will, like, right, we're going to hit these milestones. But in this interim where it's like, okay, no paycheck, I have so much meaning and joy. And I'm realizing I'm already doing what I love. And that is like such a critical thing, I think, to figure out now. and almost like disattach yourself from working for that paycheck, even though I know we still have the reality of paying bills. We're not in AGI land yet. So hard to picture that. But getting there now before all this hits is, I think, just underrated, the importance of that.
Absolutely.
Anything you'd add to that, Dave or Dylan?
As you were talking, I was thinking about actually one of the interviews that I just conducted earlier this morning as a day of recording for this book. Local friend of mine who is total workaholic, going through burnout like I am, but she is, serial entrepreneur, and I was talking to her about because she's on board with this idea. She's a researcher, doctorate. She sees the writing on the wall that, if AI and robotics continue at their current pace for any length of time, and, it could even still be accelerating for all we know. I do think that there's some headwinds, some friction, because, models are getting more expensive to train. But once it gets integrated with society, the writing's on the wall. And I was talking to her, and one of the last questions that came up was, well, like, what do we do? How do we find meaning? And she's like, I don't even know my neighbors. And it's just like, you make such a simple observation. It's like, well, what happens when everyone is like, I'm almost imagining it's like at the end of that movie, Her, when like all the AIs go away and then everyone like comes out of their house and they reconnect with each other. Like, it's going to be like that, but it's the AI is going to kick us out of the house. It's like, remember when you were little and your parents were like, go play outside. Like your home robot is going to be like, I got this. Like, go talk to some other humans.
And see, that's the life I love. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
are you kidding? That's coming? Bring on AGI. Why are we so afraid of it? Like, hello, that's a better life. And that's like Wall-E kind of ended that way too.
That's what I was going to mention that too. Like how many movies when everybody just like walks out of their house is the new ending. But yeah, I was thinking that like if artificial intelligence is aligned with you individually, and it's not like because of a company that's trying to like maximize your retention and engagement, yeah, it probably would. It would probably tell you like, we're done here. Like, I'm not answering any more questions, and like, I'm not gonna let you film another YouTube video, Julia, because it's time for you to go outside. And like, you know what I mean? It'll just say what we need to hear. So hopefully, if it's aligned, maybe it could be a voice of reason like that.
Yep. Yeah. I've talked to people that are worried that, AI is all just going to abide by another optimization algorithm, like optimizing for attention or giving you exactly what you want, which certainly some people will probably use it that way. But, your phones, like you can have safety settings where it's like, it just reminds you how much you've used it and it'll automatically switch apps off after you've used them too much. I have all those settings on because sometimes it gets away from you, right? It's like, all right, that's enough Twitter for today, or whatever, that's enough Reddit for today. But despite those optimizing algorithms, and despite the fact that like the dopamine reward mechanism in my brain is like, keep doing this thing, I get that little reminder and it's like, okay, cool, yes. And sometimes I'll literally like chuck my phone across the room, like toss it onto the couch, and my wife is like, I'm always nervous when you do that. How can you throw such an expensive device that you rely on? I'm like, but I'm done with it, and it landed on the couch anyways. But this actually, so there's a whole point to this story, and that's a longtime fan and now friend of mine. He has this philosophy of use your smart brain to trick your dumb brain into doing the right things. And so that's like, you create friction or barriers around the easy, addictive, comfortable thing. And so it's like, oh yeah, well, if my phone locks itself or, disables the apps after a certain amount of time. And so while some people are afraid that like, AI girlfriends or AI boyfriends, or, we might just become super self-indulgent, which is, that's kind of the Wall-E thing. That's kind of commentary. Like if life is super solved, are some people just going to literally become couch potatoes and little blob shaped, humans? But I think that, while some people might, that's their choice. But for me, it's like, I look at what I'm doing, which is like, I'm spending more time in the woods and I'm talking with people that I enjoy, and I'm focusing on like finding the things where I can still add value. Because that was when I made the announcement that I was taking a break from AI. A whole bunch of people said like, there's still more that you can contribute. And I said, yes, I know, but I also want to live for myself first. But Julia and a bunch of other people that are just like, okay, well, how can we make this work? And to your point, Julia, like, I think that even if the world is solved from an economic standpoint, like, it's still a human world. and we'll still have each other and need each other. And there's so many dimensions to unpack on that.
So many.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think
mean,
like founders. Oh, sorry.
No, you go
Dylan.
first. It's your turn to talk. I want to hear your thoughts.
No, your turn next. Founders like Elon Musk like really have it wrong when they recommend, it's funny. First of all, to see them sitting there recommending best practices when I'm like, are you even in touch, with a generalized baseline of humanity? Anyway, point aside, it's like, oh, well, the recommendation from Elon is this thing will watch your kids. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do if I'm not, hugging my 2-year-old? Like, am I sitting there on my phone and then the Tesla bot's doing that? Well, that's not at all the future I personally want. So I think tech founders are out of the loop with what the market, and the market always speaks. That's the beautiful thing about the world. Like, it's easy to think, oh, well, a small group of people have the final say, when if you look at the history of humanity and the cycles that we've been through, that's not the case at all. It's always the market that speaks in the end, even if there is a short period of this limited number of control or a limited group having control over a maximum group in the world. That's always a short time span, like a blip in the history of hundreds of years. So I think that it's easy to see headlines and then get scared and think, oh, that's how it has to be. And we completely forget that we're actually the ones in control of how we use this. And that is a beautiful thing. Back to you, Dylan.
No, yeah, I think about just purpose and where it comes from sometimes. And I'm kind of imagining how children grow and they don't have purpose at first, but something happens early in their life where they either get some recognition or they feel good about something, or sometimes they're even kind of instructed to do something from like a teacher or a parent, but they do it enough that they start like finding a certain rhythm or flow state, and then that becomes their passion. And it's kind of about, as AI takes maybe different jobs from us and there is more free time, how people stop thinking, okay, I need to like go earn money working at this restaurant or something to be who I am. And then like who I am is now kind of in my control, and them actually accepting that like, okay, life, like the job opportunities aren't going to dictate who I am and what I think about myself. Like, it's now up to me to do that. And yeah, if people sort of realize that and then take it on, it's a kind of a beautiful thing, and they can be whatever, you could be the world's expert at any obscure thing and get satisfaction out of it and recognition out of it. But you'll have to like make that decision, because it's not the jobs that are going to kind of force us into it in the future.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep. And to your point, it's, a lot of people live where the job is. I remember I was listening to, I think it was the HBR, the Harvard Business Review podcast a couple of years ago. And this serial entrepreneur, he was a guest on the podcast, and he said, oh, you give someone $200,000 a year and I'll make you live wherever I want you to. And I'm like, what a disgusting outlook on life. Like, yes, it's true. You can bait someone to, say like, oh, well, I need you to live in London for a year to work, and I'm like, but why? Like, why have we built society that way? And of course, that's a rhetorical question. But in the future, one of the things that I've recommended to people is, be thinking about where you want to live to have the right social milieu for how you want to live. So like my wife and I, we moved to a small town. So the town we live in now is 7,000 people. And that is the sweet spot for us. And it's like, that's just, it has the right culture. It has the right vibe. There's a lot of artists here. There's a lot of writers here. So it's just the right town for us. And that even just 5 years ago before the pandemic, that would not necessarily have been an option, because the expectation was you're still going to go to a tech job and commute and be in person. Like for me, the pandemic was a blessing in disguise, because that's remote work. So it's like, cool, well, I don't need to live in a big city anymore. And then, so on and so forth. And I think that a lot of people will discover this. Now, that being said, there are plenty of people who would prefer to live in a city, for the social reasons, for the, opportunities, the culture and everything like that. And, more power to them. And, one thing that happened during the pandemic was, and it's actually still ongoing, is San Francisco has lost so many people. There's been this mass exodus from San Francisco that there are empty office buildings that they're trying to figure out what to do with. They're converting some of them to apartment buildings because they're like, we don't actually need to be here, and it's way too expensive. So I'm hoping that we're going to have this like really interesting social recalibration over the coming decades where people live where they would prefer to live. And that'll drive down prices of some cities because again, if you leave for economic reasons, go somewhere else. And there's plenty of people in my audience that have said like, oh yeah, like I moved to middle of nowhere Arkansas or middle of nowhere Nebraska because that's just where I prefer to live. Cost of living is super low, and then they still have a remote developer job. Now, who knows how long that'll last? I don't know if you guys saw in the news, but it's been reported. I don't know if it's a leak or if it was actually like officially reported, but Google said that 25% of their code is written by AI now. That's Google of all places. Yeah. So, and this is year zero. So, what's that number going to be next year, and then the year after that? That's top of mind for me lately.
Yeah, same. I think that's like something we'll be exploring a lot in First Movers, which is where we're going to get inside. I'm building a team. You're an advisor in this, Dave. And we're actually going to get inside workflows and ask ourselves this one question: how do we automate everything without building a single app? And I mean, that's going to be insane, but it's going to be possible in so many ways. So yeah, the future's bright. So the last topic on the list is AI's role in online dating. So I want to hand this over, first of all, to you, Dylan, because I know you live and breathe like the news topics. But what I like about your YouTube channel, which if you haven't subscribed, it's Dylan Curious. What I like about your YouTube channel is it's not just like, oh, here's the news. It's a thoughtful breakdown of what is interesting or even like entertaining. So you've probably come across several stories here. So I'd love to start with you. Like, where do you see AI's role in online dating falling? Do you see like the future being, I'll actually want to date an AI girlfriend versus a human? Or do you see like that not happening? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, so many directions to go. Like I've read stories of people who've been caught in these circles. I've talked about how from like an efficiency point of view, it does seem to make some matches that are kind of better than the traditional matchmaking. There also takes away some of the magic, and the business models sort of align in sort of creepy ways occasionally. And it's just a big mess. I don't even know if I have like a great opinion about it yet. I know that these AIs in the future could be hyper persuasive. And I think about what it means to persuade somebody, and it means like understanding what it is that triggers their kind of emotions, their feelings, makes them feel like something. And when AI can make us feel like something, I think then we have that relationship with the AI. It's not just like an informational source. It's not like Google. It's not like asking ChatGPT something. It's the kind of tool that will prompt you and say, hey, like, no, like noticed you feel this way, or like got this funny TikTok video I wanted to show you. And when Siri starts sending you that kind of stuff and you're like, that is funny, thanks, like I'll talk to you later, I gotta go. And then it's just, I don't know. I think it might start filling in some of the things that humans did. And is it healthy or unhealthy? Kind of depends on your relationship with it, how it balances out in the real life, what kind of world you live in. If you're deprived in some way, I think it could be beautiful. If you're missing out on human connections, I think it could be a problem, and everybody's situation will be kind of different, but it's really hard for me to get my head around it right now.
What would you add, Dave?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I've studied quite a bit from numerous angles. And so like I ran polls on my audiences, and some people like, would you have sex with a robot or a romantic relationship or whatever? And then the joke was like, 60% of people are already horny for robots, and the other 30% are lying. It's kind of that my audience is heavily skewed to men and tech nerds, so take that with a grain of salt. But on a more serious note, like some of the anecdotes from inside my communities, some people have learned better communication skills through interacting with chatbots, because especially because they don't often remember context that well. You have to be much more explicit about what you need and what you want. And so, I mean, I even noticed that myself. Like, I'm able to better frame, like, okay, how am I going to prompt this human? How, it's like humans require prompt engineering as well, right? It's just, we call it communication. So I think everyone is going to learn, and anyone who interacts with these tools, whether it is an academic tool or a scientific tool or whatever, you still learn to communicate slightly differently. And there was an article. What did they call it? It wasn't exocognition. It was like the opposite of embodied cognition. It was I don't remember what it was called. But people are starting to study this. Like, are we actually are we actually delegating some of our cognition and learning rather than thinking for ourselves? We're actually learning to use another tool. Just the same that we learned to like offload, Google. I don't remember all the facts, but or even where I found the facts, but I remember how to find them. Right? It's like if you learn to use the card catalog, you don't need to memorize the bookshelves in the library. Now, if you're a librarian, you do that anyways. But in terms of how it might kind of end up, kind of one of the more outlandish possibilities is some of the people again in my audience, they talked about how they have their domestic partnership, their spouse, but then they have emotional relationships they both have emotional relationships with like chatbots or something, and they said that it actually fills in a lot of gaps. Where it's like, oh, well, I can't talk to my wife about this topic because she doesn't know about it or she doesn't care. Or, the wife says, like, I can't talk, I talk to this, more emotionally intelligent chatbot, so on and so forth. And that was like, it was like this sort of like robo polyamory. It's like what might be emerging for some people. And then, in my personal case, growing up, I thought it would be so cool to have like robot friends. And now that it's like actually here, I'm just like, I only prefer humans. And I like, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, like that's why I was trying to build cognitive architectures, was just, here, I want to create something that is superhuman to talk to. And now that it's there, I'm just like, well, okay, that's neat. And so then I just kind of default back to preferring humans. So I suspect that we're going to just see a broad range of reactions in the long run, to the rise of not just chatbots, but robots and everything else.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys know who Charlie is? Penguin Zero, Moist Critical. Mm-mm. He's like a big YouTuber. Okay, he's more in like the entertainment space. So it's not like an AI kind of thing. But yeah, he's super huge, and when he makes comments, they go very viral. And he was saying he's been putting out this thing that like he's like, I don't think sex robots should have too much personality because they're not going to enjoy their lives. Like they're not going to, that's not a place to put an AI because it should be able to reject you. It should be able to like do all the things to protect itself from a bad life too. And it reminded me of the Rick and Morty episode where they bring this butter to life. It's like hyper conscious and it's looking for its purpose. And Rick's like, you serve butter. And he's like, no, there's got to be more to life than this, right? Like I'm a robot. I just serve butter. And he's like, you serve butter. Like you got to go get used to it. So I'm also starting to wonder like what the AI in the relationship deserves too. Like, do they get to be part of the conversation? Like, because that would be a real relationship at that point too. So maybe those need to be built in. Yeah.
That will be a very complicated question as to whether or not machines have consciousness, sentience, feelings, whether or not they are like there's any moral salience to their state of being as an entity. That's worth several volumes of writing and conversation.
Coming right
yeah. Now we'll tackle that one next week.
Yeah. Because I don't know if you guys are, but like in general, maybe like there should be a limit to intelligence if the robot is doing something just super repetitive and sort of sad or depressing. I don't know.
I mean, we already explored this with Marvin from Hitchhiker's Guide, as voiced by Alan Rickman. Brain the size of a planet, and you ask me to open the door. Like, do you call that job satisfaction? Because I don't. Phenomenal line. Perfectly delivered by Alan Rickman, a.k.a. Severus Snape. Or not Snape. Anyways, probably misquoted him. But yeah, so I think that's about it. I think we covered all the topics. Julia, you want to wind us up?
Yes. Well, just to add on real quick to your last point, to this topic, something you said, Dave, I think I find really true as well. I've never in my life actually been I classify myself as an introvert, but I've never had more conversations going at one time with humans. And as like the chatbots get better and better, as like reasoning deploys in OpenAI, I find myself using that for more and more, I'd say like black and white situations. Yes, some gray areas where it's communication based, but more like, okay, here's something I need to do. Can you help me do it? And then I find myself going to, okay, what creative human have I met in the last 2 weeks? Because I'm meeting so many people now in my work that I could talk to you about this problem. And I get so much more out of that conversation with a human. And so I think like, and Dune portrayed this really well. Like whenever the machines took over, man wanted to go back to man. And so like this idea of like, as the machines evolve, get better and better, going, and this ties into our earlier conversation of AGI, will it tell us like, hey, I'm going to shut down now so you can go talk to your fellow human? Because in the end, machines are machines, and even sentience is a simulation of what we as humans have just by nature. So it's a interesting conversation there. But
okay,
I
hey,
think,
Julia, I hate to,
yes.
before I totally end, just because like I just have to know, but you do have a
here.
daughter. You do have a daughter,
Yeah.
and if you see her as she gets older and she becomes a teenager, like dating or talking with an AI, are you going to require her to like hand it over to you so that you can also get to know what it is? And are you going to ask it like, what have you been talking to my daughter about? Or are you going to be willing to let her have that relationship privately?
I think it would depend on her age. Like, obviously if you're 18,
like teenagers or something.
Okay, so let's say under 18. I would have a lot of questions for that AI. Like, I would not trust it enough to be like, hey, just go talk to my daughter, who's a very like loving by nature, personality filled, will tell you all of her secrets. And then it's like, oops, I didn't mean to tell you that. And it's like, that's her nature. So I know that. So I'd be like, I would definitely want some parental oversight on that thing. Definitely.
Because I guess you'd want to spend time getting to know it also, right? So you could kind of feel out what it says to you, and that would give you an estimate of what it says to her. But it could be very different to both of you too. So it's like a tricky problem.
That's true. Oh yeah, especially if it has like way more intelligence, because I think simulated intelligence will be so far beyond our own at an AGI level. That scenario that you described could exactly come up where it's like, oh, it's telling mom everything mom wants to hear. It looks very benign, but then, Dave has made these points really well, where it's like, well, these machines are actually aligned, and we don't have proof that they're not. So that's another podcast episode. But
it could be encouraging your daughter to go be the best of herself. So I don't know. It's just it's a tricky thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's good in it.
Relationships are so personal.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a tricky one. That's a great question. Well, I will go back to the wrap-ups. So we have so much. I hope you guys tune into this podcast frequently, because we will have episodes every week, just like this one today, where we dive into both the here and now, what's happening and what's coming, future, just analogies, situations. How do we handle AGI when it's in these lifelike forms? How do we handle robots merging with humanity? What will that world even look like? You can tell I can't even get out words because I'm just like, what? So that is coming to Leaders of AI with a lot of additional guests. This conversation with Dylan was awesome. It was great to have you here, Dylan. Thank you so much for joining. And you can find this podcast on every platform where you listen. We're on just about all of them. So we are published to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Alexa, Pandora, iHeartRadio. That list goes on. So open your favorite app, subscribe, stay tuned. There's going to be amazing conversations. You're listening to Leaders of AI with Julie McCoy and Dave Shapiro. We'll see you on the next episode.